The cultural phenomenon that is Star Wars has taken some big hits recently, specifically between the years 1999 and 2005, the era that marks the release of the prequel trilogy. Though these three films are not without their redeeming qualities, they resulted in a massive blow to the good faith that was built up over the years after three groundbreaking films, cutting-edge video games, and a decent, though somewhat inconsistent, expanded universe. The purchase of Lucasfilm by Disney is an opportunity to make things right again, to wipe the slate clean. There's so much potential to make this saga fantastic again. Maybe not to the extent the originals were, especially those first two. Those were like catching lightning in a bottle. And it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle. Because if you're holding the bottle when it's hit by lightning, you'd definitely be killed. Like, immediately. Misunderstood metaphors aside, this video aims to look at some ways to make the new Star Wars films successful again. Dun, 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 dun. First off, pick a villain or villains and stick to them. There needn't have been any of this, okay, here's your villain. Dead. Never mind him. What about this different guy introduced halfway through the second movie? Do you like him? Irrelevant. He's dead. Oh, and this guy? Yeah, he's also dead. He's the most dead. You need to give audiences time to build a healthy understanding of the villain's motivations and to fear them. Not so much fear them in the respect of, hey, that's a scary looking monster man, but fear them for what they could do to a protagonist if they were put in the same room. That's the difference between your Darth Vaders and whoever this guy was supposed to be. Na 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 na. When the sequel trilogy hits in 2015, 32 years would have passed between it and Return of the Jedi. So ideally, the movie should allow for real time to have passed between the two films. This is only worth mentioning due to this bizarre idea that some filmmakers have gotten over the past 5 years or so, that you can de-age an actor digitally, or in fact recreate them entirely using CGI, and it looks totally acceptable. The end result is always jarring. Maybe not Polar Express jarring, but that film dipped so far into the uncanny valley, it reached the core of the earth and combusted. Seeing Harrison Ford in a brown wig and having his wrinkles airbrushed away like a Sex and the City movie poster would be a painful cinematic experience. This technology has a long way to go, and quite frankly, a new Star Wars film isn't the best place to take it out for another test drive. This seems like an obvious one, but ideally they want to cut as many ties as possible with the prequels. Despite being as unpopular as they are, episodes 1 to 3 are official Star Wars canon, making it impossible to erase their existence. And that's fine, but it doesn't mean they need to be referenced or have any characters carry over. A lot of continuity isn't taken seriously anyways within those films themselves. The idea of midichlorians was only ever brought up in episode 1, and the implication that Anakin was created by the Emperor, or whatever that opera conversation was about, was only mentioned once, and then dropped immediately. These and other things are, yes, things that did happen, but they should have no impact on future installments. Samuel L. Jackson made mention that he'd like to return as perhaps a one-handed Jedi or a ghost. Now, neither of these work. If he was still alive, where has he been for the last 5 decades? And if he's a ghost, well, nobody living would recognize him. The only actor that would make some sense in returning would be Ewan McGregor, reprising his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi, albeit deceased. This would simply be down to Alec Guinness being unavailable, due to being both dead and hating Star Wars. But even then, having him appear, it's a bit of a stretch. Na 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 na. Next to the Darth Vader Luke Skywalker I'm your father moment, probably the most emotional scene from the original trilogy was Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. That scene is crazy intense. The music ramps up, Chewbacca's all flinging guys around, but most importantly, it's heartbreaking because Han and Leia are separated in such a dramatic fashion. You can see when Han tells Chewie that he needs to look after her whilst he's away, that he means it, and that these two characters, they really love one another. Point being, one of the main reasons Empire resonates so well with audiences is because when you boil it down, it's a love story. A love story dressed up with robots and space worms and limb loss, but a love story nonetheless. The new films will probably benefit from a well fleshed out love story that results in a union of characters in a natural way that makes sense in the context of the film. Nope, not like that. Since around the mid-90s, there's been an overabundance of green screen use and CGI characters used in cinema as opposed to practical sets and puppetry. CGI is at its best when it's enhancing a prop or a set that already exists in the real world. Even some of the most iconic special effects moments in cinema that people believe are computer generated are in fact practical effects. For example, much of the T-1000 liquid metal stuff from Terminator 2 was done using prosthetics or puppetry, as is most of the Raptor kitchen scene from Jurassic Park. And of course, more recently, the Inception spinny hallway thing was a real spinny hallway. Just because it's easier to CGI in a background or a character doesn't mean you should. It can work really well when creating a distinct comic book world like Sin City, but not so much with your Sky Captain and the world of Who Remembers That Film. Dun 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 dun. Na, 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 na. It's been said that in addition to a new trilogy, Disney will be releasing a number of spin-off films that will take us places and tell stories that the sequel films couldn't. This is of course the whole concept behind the expanded universe, and it currently includes some fairly diverse ideas, such as Death Troopers, a Star Wars horror story set just before A New Hope. The great thing about spin-off stories is that you can literally tell any story in any period of time, going back to the formation of the Old Republic to thousands of years in the future. And it would be ideal if Disney and Lucasfilm took advantage of that. The stories could just as easily run parallel with the sequel trilogy also, but they don't necessarily need to be limited to just that. No. Wait! I'm not finished yet. Any Star Wars spin-off story should ideally deal with a new character we haven't seen before in any of the previous film incarnations. With the exception of perhaps Boba Fett, there aren't any existing characters that would really require their own movie. And even with Boba Fett, he's become significantly less interesting since his appearance as a dull 10-year-old boy. That's not to say existing characters couldn't make appearances, but the focus should be on people either introduced in episodes 7, 8, or 9, or entirely separate characters.